Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are
Above Replacement Radio.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Triant. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. It is the first episode of the month of March. This is, of course, the month where real baseball is played, which is very, very exciting. I think it's one of my favorite months of the year. You know, it is still cold out, but there's obviously that light at the end of the tunnel. At the end of the off season, we have the daylight savings time beginning, which is like, even though you lose an hour of sleep, it's just an all-time vibes day. You know, once you readjust to losing the hour of sleep with seeing how bright it is so late. And you know that baseball is coming. You know, I mean, one of our favorite yearly traditions that we do on this podcast is Players to Watch. We are continuing that today, moving over to the AL because our randomized list of divisions was so great to us this year. And we got the American League Central today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And great thing about March is MLB free agency really starts to heat up around this time. We know that like it's just the hot stove is really starting to cook around March, right around opening day. It really starts to get going. So yeah, and yeah, we have the AL Central, so we will get into that. But first, we have a short bit of news to get into with the San Francisco Giants making another free agent signing. You know, no necessarily splashes from them, I would say. None of the huge moves that happened in the offseason. However, they've made a long list of mid-tier moves, and they continue that with Matt Chapman, who they signed for 3 years and $54 million, I believe.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, what did you think of this move by San Francisco?
What was MLB Trade Rumors projection on him?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. I can get the information on that.
I don't think anyone could have seriously predicted 3 years and 54 million for Matt Chapman. I'm going to find it. They had him at 6 years and 150 mil. One of the people had him to the Giants, so they nailed that. Yeah, I mean, it is a very weird contract. Obviously, he does get opt-outs. You know, for a couple of years, he gets one every year of this contract. Essentially, there's also a mutual option going into 2027. Those are almost never accepted, though. So I can't really wrap my head around how this got to this point. You know, like Boris very much held out. I mean, it's not Boris, it's the owners. Like the owners all just kind of decided to hold out this year and not pay a lot of various free agents: Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, Matt Chapman, Jordan Montgomery, JD Martinez. There's been a lot of talk about, oh, Scott Boras, he's bad for the sport. He's, you know, holding these guys out and trying to get them money they shouldn't get. It's the owners. It always has been the owners. It always will be the owners. You know, I don't think anyone trying to evaluate this offseason back in November could have seriously projected Matt Chapman anywhere near a 3-year, $54 million contract, not even in terms of the years, but really to a degree, even the average annual value, right? I mean, 6 years, 150, that's what, 25 mil a year, if my math is correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
And yeah, and he's getting 18 mil a year. So, I mean, this is a very team friendly deal, to say the least. Obviously, you know, it benefits Matt Chapman in that it gives him an opt out because, you know, hopefully this won't happen again in another year. I mean, it has in the past, but yeah, it's been a very strange offseason, and Matt Chapman has kind of been victimized by the owner's unwillingness to spend on certain players.
Yeah, I definitely agree in terms of the length. However, I think MLB Trade Rumors was probably stretching it a little bit because I mean, like, you know, I would have understood maybe the old, you know,
yeah, 6 years at 18 mil a year would be fine.
Yeah, that would make sense. Because yeah, I mean, Matt Chapman, I believe, is heading into his age 31.
31.
Yeah, 31 season. So yeah, I mean, even a 5-year deal, I think if I would have had to predict before this, I probably would have predicted around a 5-year deal. But yeah, I mean, he's been around a 4-win player over the past couple years, and especially, hasn't been as good as he was earlier in his career. So I think that's an alarming trend for some teams. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like, yeah, I'm not sure how much he was going to get average annual value wise. But it does seem that these holdouts with this Bellinger and Chapman contract are shortening contracts more than anything.
Yeah, no, they absolutely are. And they are giving, players another chance at free agency, which I guess is good. But it's definitely still very weird to see. Going into Matt Chapman specifically, he had a pretty tremendous batted ball profile in 2023. Unfortunately, the results just didn't quite line up with it. He had his highest line drive rate in a full season since 2018. He had a 30% fly ball rate, only a 35% ground ball rate. And obviously, yeah, you look at the results and you're like, well, this was a league average hitter. Um, and the expected statistics weren't quite there for him. I mean, they were there for him. But he hit the ball very hard. He had an elite chase rate. He walked at a stunning amount at 10.7%. And he's still a very strong defender and a quick runner at the third base position. Like they're getting the Giants for, not a lot of money are getting a guy that has a chance to be a very dynamic player, a guy that's familiar with the Bay Area, a guy that's familiar with playing under Bob Melvin. I think this could benefit the team pretty tremendously and be maybe the best value contract of the offseason.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, he was in both of our top 10 third baseman lists. So yeah, I mean, he's a pretty good value to have. And yeah, like I wonder what this means for JD Davis, who played a lot of third base last year and actually had 5 outs above average at the position, which is more than Chapman. Obviously, Chapman's going to play third base, so I wonder where Davis ends up going because I think he hit well enough to stay in the lineup. Um, he'll he could DH, he could maybe split time with Lamont Wade at first base. Who knows? So yeah, it should be interesting to see how they supplement that. But for the Giants, that's a good problem to have because I think over the past couple of years they've been a team loaded with holes and loaded with guys who wouldn't get at bats on most teams, but would get at bats on their team. Now with some of these deals, with Matt Chapman coming along, Jorge Soler being signed, Jung Hoo Lee being signed, they're filling a lot of holes and they're not gonna give out as many plate appearances to guys that maybe should be more role guys, more platoon guys that were getting starting time. So, they've done a decent job this offseason of just kind of, putting more competent baseball players on their team.
You know who I think is really, really kicking themselves right now is the Cincinnati Reds. This is a team that brought in Jeimer Candelario on a 3-year, $45 million contract. Not a lot more than what Matt Chapman just got. And if you look at the home run numbers, Matt Chapman hit 17 home runs last year. He was projected to hit 17 in Toronto, where he actually played. He was projected to hit 18 in San Francisco, where he's now going to be playing. He would have hit 35 if he had played in Cincinnati. That is a stunning difference. Obviously Cincinnati known for being a very big hitters park. It has smaller dimensions, kind of generally all around the field, shorter walls. And for only like only $10 million more, they could have had a very good defender, a strong offensive player. And I mean, I know that they're probably signing Jeimer Candelario to mostly be uh a guy to help out the veteran or the young guys on this team as a veteran. They don't know how much playing time they see him getting because the Reds already have a loaded infield. But if you're going to go out and get a third baseman for a multi-year contract, I mean, they're probably kicking themselves for not holding out on a guy like Matt Chapman. It's obviously hard to predict that his value is going to go down that much. But in hindsight, I think it's easy to look at that and be like, man, what an opportunity we could have had there.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, when the Reds were signing Candelario, they were probably like, "All right, well, we're not really we can't really afford to be in the Matt Chapman sweepstakes.
Yeah.
So, in terms of length or, average annual value. So we'll just get Candelario. He'll help our team. We're not going to try to spend too much this off season. But yeah, I mean, for 3 million more a year, they could have just had Matt
Yeah.
Chapman in the
It's
in the end.
weird. It's weird because I don't know how needed Jamer Candelario even really was to begin with. Right? Like if you take him out of that lineup, you still have an infield with guys like Spencer Steer, with Jonathan India, Ellie De La Cruz, LV Marte, Christian Encarnacion Strand. Like
Matt
they could have
McLean.
Matt McLean is another. Yeah, like they had already a loaded infield, and they did bring in Candelario as a left-handed bat, a guy that I mean could help out some of these guys, maybe especially the Latin players. Um, but yeah, I mean, they could have very easily gone on without making that trade or making that signing, and then could have realized in early March, hey, Matt Chapman's available and his value's gone down this much. Why not? Because clearly they were willing to sign another infielder on a multi-year contract. And yeah, it could have been Matt Chapman.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I imagine they just weren't predicting it was gonna go this route. And yeah, I mean, looking at some of those earlier signings of the offseason, like yeah, it's just hard to imagine those deals happening in that fashion now. Like, could you imagine Nola was still in the market and then he randomly got 7 years and $172 million? Like, no.
Shout out to Aaron Nola for signing on November like 19th.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he
Like
didn't
he
even.
saved himself so much money. Was he a Boris guy as well?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure. I do a
If he
bad
wasn't a
job of.
Boris guy, then I can't imagine he probably would have cost himself that much. Yeah, no, he's not. He probably would have signed in like December then or January
Right, right.
for around this value.
Yeah. So it's really been interesting how this all has played out. Maybe with Chapman, it's sort of an precautionary age thing. With Bellinger, I think it was just they wanted to wait on his performance to repeat itself. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that transfers with Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery, who are, the two big guys still out there.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I do, obviously in terms of value, I love this for the Giants. They're getting a player for, from a team's perspective, below their market value. I feel bad for Matt Chapman because, I mean, he just, I don't, I don't think anyone could have predicted like this major league holdout would have happened on all of these guys. Um, and yeah, he just happens to be a pretty bad victim of it right now. But all it takes is one very good season out of him, where maybe his expected stats and his hard hit rate and his exit velocities really translate into results. You opt out of that, and then you go get your deal.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, this offseason is unique compared to the other ones that have dragged on for a long time because, like, remember most famously the Manny Machado Bryce Harper offseason, like both those guys were still on the market come, late
Bryce Harper signed
February.
on February 28th, I believe.
Yeah. And but in this offseason, like Otani and Yamamoto, the two clearly biggest guys, already signed, like, and they signed in December, like both in December, right?
hmm
Yamamoto signed in December. So yeah, like, so it's not like there was a pin that had to be dropped, like
Oh
with
my God. Can you imagine how insufferable this offseason was if Shohei was a free agent until like late February?
yeah, no, it
Would
would.
have been the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, and I'm happy for the sport of baseball that doesn't have to happen because, this is less, under a microscope
Yeah.
here when you got like Snell and Montgomery in the market instead of the best player in baseball.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, shout out to Shohei for being a married man now. Congrats to him.
Yeah, shout out to him and his normal Japanese woman wife.
hmm
Um,
That he's
yeah,
known for a period of time.
yeah, that he's known for a period of time. That is that was pretty
Yeah.
phenomenal there.
Yeah, I get it. I feel like that was just his way of being like, there are no follow-ups. It's like,
Yeah,
how are you supposed to follow that up as a reporter?
that is tough.
because I mean he gave you the most basic description you could ever try to give a person, and
yeah,
I think that was his way of being like, "It's my wife. I married her," and
it was
that's
like a
it. That's all
it
you're
was,
getting.
it was like a police sketch description.
Exactly.
It's, it was very interesting. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so the Giants have Matt Chapman now. Yeah, I kind of obviously they missed the playoffs last year, but given the amount of bats they've picked up, which was very necessary after having a team OPS plus of 92 last year, getting some bats and Jordan Hicks, like I really like the improvements they've made, and I think they've definitely improved their odds at the playoffs. I'm not sure if they're playoff favorites right now, but I think their odds are they have as much of a chance as the next team.
For sure.
Um, yeah, anything more on the Chapman signing?
No, I think that was all I had. I mean, it's, I feel bad for the guy in terms of this holdout and how it's affected him. But the Giants are getting a good one for a good price.
Yeah, yeah. So now on to our fourth divisional breakdown of 2024. Yeah, it's our fifth season of divisional breakdowns, and I think they keep getting better as we keep getting better at, identifying players, or maybe not picking the best players to succeed, but just evaluating them and talking about what cool things they've done or can do. So yeah, we have the AL Central this week. And we start with the as as my Google Chrome tries to load, we start with the Kansas City Royals, who had a disappointing year last year. I think some fans were anticipating they take a little bit of a step up, but they took two steps backward in 2024, or in 2023 rather, and they went 56 and 106 and finished last in the AL Central. In terms of subtractions, they lost Edward Olivares, uh, or Edward Alvarez, I believe is how you pronounce it. Uh, Brad Keller, Zach Greinke, Taylor Clark, and Josh Dumont. And they added Seth Lugo, Michael Walker, Adam Frazier, Hunter Renfroe, Kyle Wright, Will Smith, the reliever. I mistakenly said he was a Ranger last week, but he's in fact on the Royals. And they also added John Schreiber and Austin Nola. Who is your Royals player to watch?
The Royals are an interesting team this year. A lot of people kind of geeked out over the offseason additions they made with guys like Michael Waka, guys like Seth Lugo, guys like Hunter Renfroe. I think there's far more to this team in terms of what makes them interesting. They obviously saw a major midseason acquisition blossom for them in Cole Reagans, and I'm looking at another midseason acquisition they made that looked good for them, and that was Nelson Velasquez. They got him from the Cubs in exchange for Jose Cuas, a reliever, and in 40 games with the Royals last year, he slashed 233, 299, 579 for an 878 OPS and a 134 OPS plus. Throughout the year with both the Cubs and the Royals, he had an average exit velocity of 91 miles per hour. He had a pull rate of 45.5% and a fly ball rate of 41.1%. And this resulted in a 374 expected WOBA, a 575 expected slugging, and a 21.7% barrel rate. That's the second highest barrel rate among the 402 hitters with at least 100 batted balls. The only person he trailed was a man named Aaron Judge. And against all fastballs, four seamers, cutters, and sinkers, Nelson Velasquez hit 325 and slugged 875 with very similar expected statistics. One thing that he did was show really remarkable power, specifically to center field. The average hit distance on balls hit straight away for Nelson Velasquez was 247 feet. That was the second most among the 452 hitters with at least 25 batted balls that were hit straight away. He slugged 839 on balls hit straight away. That was the eighth highest on that same list of 452. And on 46 plate appearances that ended on a four seam fastball, he hit 333 and slugged 978, the highest of the 498 hitters with at least 25 plate appearances ending on fastballs. And I believe that was the highest by 100 points exactly. He also had a 559 WOBA, which ranked first, a 363 expecting batted average, which ranked fifth, a 964 expected slugging that ranked first by a landslide, a 547 expected WOBA that ranked first, a 68.8% hard hit rate that ranked seventh, and a 5.4% run value per 100, which ranked tied with Royce Lewis for first. So Nelson Velasquez was among the best hitters in baseball last year against four-seam fastballs. And for that reason, and for many others, he is my player to watch for Kansas City this season.
Yeah, that is quite the impressive resume for, yeah, he kind of slipped on, he very much slipped under the radar. Uh, had just randomly had an 888 OPS for the Royals. You know, which is also crazy considering, you know, hitting at Kauffman Stadium half the
Yep.
time. Yeah, very, 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 very interesting. That's pretty exciting for Kansas City. My Royals player to watch is Michael Garcia, their third baseman from last year. And despite having a 681 OPS last year, which is not ideal, he did have a 76th percentile sweet spot rate, 82nd percentile whiff rate, 87th percentile average exit velocity, 89th percentile chase rate, 93rd percentile hard hit rate, and an 82nd percentile expected batting average. Much of his expected batting average was helped by a 29% line drive rate, which ranks 8th out of 169 hitters with 300 plus batted balls last year. He also had a 21% hard hit line drive rate, which ranked first among those 169. You could have given me 100 guesses who would be first on that list. I would not have guessed Michael Garcia from the Kansas City Royals, but it just happened to be so. And that's even as a guy, and you know, me talking about him, he's not even one of these high strikeout rate guys where, you know, it's easier to, you know, kind of get the per batted ball rate stats like that. But his strikeout rate was fairly average, not necessarily near 30% like a lot of the guys that I mentioned on here. With Michael Garcia also, his best feature as a player is defense. In the field, he had 15 outs above average, with 13 coming from the third base position, and he ranked ninth among all fielders in outs above average, and second among third basemen second among third basemen behind Ke'Bryan Hayes. So he was a top 10 fielder in baseball, at least among non-catchers last year, as well as, you know, the best at getting hard hit line drives, which should translate pretty well. He did underperform his expected metrics by a decent amount last year, so I expect those offensive numbers to go up. So yeah, now on to questions for the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah, so my question, which is more likely, Cole Reagans becomes the true ace? You know, maybe he already did it last season, but we see it over a full season this year, or Vinny Pasquantino becomes a true middle of the order bat. And by all means, we could have both, but if you had to pick one, which would you say is more likely to happen?
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I feel like, yeah, I feel like the parameters, I feel like they weigh a little bit more toward Pascantino. However, I think regarding like the competition rate, like Reagans doesn't have much competition to become the true ace of the
I mean, just like
Royals.
a true ace that like would be an ace on most staffs, I guess. Like, yeah,
Okay.
obviously he's the ace of the Royals right now, but I mean, like, you look at him as an ace no matter what team he's on.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's interesting.
same for Pasquantino, where like you put him in any lineup, he's, you know, or not any lineup, but most lineups he's hitting third or fourth.
Yeah. Yeah. And Pascantino has a career OPS plus around like 130 or something. So he's obviously very good. Cole Reagans had a crazy second half last year. Um, I'll uh I'll go ahead and say, that's a tough question. I'll say Pascantino, because I feel like we've seen it for a longer sample, and one of my things that I pointed out when I put him on the top first baseman's list, I think there was a clear point where he injured himself, and that's where his numbers sort of started dwindling last year and made him more of an average hitter than far above average hitter. So I'll just go based off of that. My question is sort of similar, except one of the players is different. So I'll preface it by saying in the second half last year, Bobby Witt Jr. had a 906 OPS and Cole Reagans had a 264 ERA. Who has the highest chance of being close to or exceeding those marks for the 2024 season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when you made these questions. I'm assuming you probably made them around when I did last night or today or whatever. But you know that I've been very high on Bobby Witt Jr. this entire offseason. And I love Cole Reagans and I really like what he did last year. But Bobby Witt Jr., I think, has a potential to take an even bigger step forward than he already did last year. So I'm gonna have to go with him on that one for sure.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I did create that question, obviously knowing your
Hmm.
admiration for Bobby Witt Jr., but I also know that you're a big Cole Reagans guy as well.
I do love both of them. I did get to watch Cole Reagan's pitch last year, which I think plays into that bias a little bit.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Um, so now on to the Chicago White Sox, who yeah would be a last place team in I think almost all other divisions. They went 61 and 101 and finished fourth in the AL Central. They lost Tim Anderson, Mike Clevenger, Liam Hendricks, Yasmani Grandal, Elvis Andrus, and Aaron Bummer. And they added Luis Patino, Dominic Leone, Tim Hill, Mike Moustakas, Brett Phillips, Kevin Pillar, Martin Maldonado, Rafael Ortega, and Dominic Fletcher. By the way, like with Moustakas, Phillips, Pillar, and Maldonado,
Ooh,
it all seems like
ooh,
guys who like
ooh,
it all seems like guys who
ooh.
like had their moment in the MLB, but are kind of they're not quite
Yeah.
there anymore.
The White Sox had more like last place vibes than the Royals did last year.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I
Yeah.
like when we started this, I like instinctively put the White Sox player to watch first, but then I realized, oh, wait, I think they did better than the Royals last year, actually. I
Yes,
think the Royals were actually a little worse.
it felt far more like a last place team with all the drama that surrounded them. But so my White Sox player to watch is actually the last of those additions that I just mentioned. And yeah, I originally didn't have him on the list, but I realized looking at him, I was like, oh yeah, he wasn't on the team last year. But that is a guy by the name of Dominic Fletcher. Don't have too much on him to be honest, but he is a 26-year-old outfielder who was traded from Arizona over to Chicago. And in 102 plate appearances in his first season at the MLB level last year, he hit 301 with a 791 OPS and 115 OPS plus. And yeah, he's still rookie eligible. So yeah, rookie of the year candidate potentially. Who knows? All I really have to say about him at the MLB level, he had an 89.7 mile per hour average exit velocity, 38% sweet spot rate, and two outs above average while also having a better than average strikeout rate. So yeah, I mean like pretty good average exit velocity numbers, very good sweet spot numbers. Well, keeping his strikeout rate better than average. So yeah, I think there's things that can translate pretty well. And maybe the White Sox got a little bit of a bargain. Who knows? So, yeah, who is your White Sox player to watch?
Yeah, mine is less based on a player and more based on a certain change that was made. I'm talking about a guy in a contract year, definitely a more high profile name. It is Eloy Jimenez. I was very high on him at the start of his career. I really took a liking to him when he got traded over in the Quintana trade, and there was a video that resurfaced of him in a home run derby where he like hit the top of a light tower and broke the light. Um, it's hard not to love a guy after that, but obviously things haven't gone quite according to plan. He's suffered a lot of injuries. He has struggled with batted ball metrics. He's There's been a lot of things, but he does have a contract year this year, and the potential I think is still there. In 489 plate appearances in 2023, Jimenez dropped his K rate to 19%. That was the first time it's been below 20% in any year throughout his career. His exit velocity was around 91 miles per hour on average. and he put up a 26% sweet spot rate, which was first percentile, the very worst. He also had a 53.2% ground ball rate, marking the highest of his career. He also had a fly ball rate, I believe below 20%. So the problem is very clear. Eloy Jimenez hits the ball very hard. He just hits it on the ground too much. If he elevates a lot more, whether he's pulling it or not, he'll be a much more productive hitter. The White Sox brought in Marcus Timms to be their hitting coach in 2024. And Timms hasn't had the most successful tenures as hitting coaches, but there is some sort of potential in a project with Eloy Jimenez to fix this, because he served as the hitting coach of the Yankees between 2018 to 2021. And in that time, the Yankees had an above average fly ball rate and a below average ground ball rate. He was then hired to be the hitting coach of the Miami Marlins in 2022. The Marlins ground ball rate had gone from 46.8% in 2021 to 44.9% in 2022. So he got hired to be the hitting coach of the Marlins, and they elevated the ball a lot more, even if they didn't quite have the power to take it out of the yard and really hit for extra bases. He still had them hitting it in the air a lot more. He then went to the Angels in 2023. Their ground ball rate stayed roughly the same, but they had one of the lowest ones in the league, and their fly ball rate went up. So Marcus Timms does have a history of turning teams and players into fly ball hitters. And Eloy Jimenez, I think, could be a guy that really takes off if he's able to connect with him and make this change. I don't know about the rest of the team and what they're going to be doing with him, but I think Eloy can be a very interesting project and could have a much better contract year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about a guy averaging a 91 mile per hour exit velocity and has a sub 20% strikeout rate. You see the potential there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I think Eloy's been a guy who's gotten 30 home runs in a season before already. So
He
yeah,
has
and he's also still pretty young, right? I mean, still like 26, 27.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so still a lot of time to get things going in the right direction. Um yeah, now moving on to questions. Yeah, and mine's sort of inherently pessimistic, but I couldn't help but notice sort of the archetype of player that they sort of have kept or either acquiring or having.
Yes.
Um, who is most likely to remind us why they were top prospects coming up? Andrew Vaughn, Andrew Benintendi, Andrew Vaughn, or Yohan Moncada?
Yeah. Three three former like top 10 in the league prospects or something like that.
Yeah,
Um
Vaughn was like the lowest ranked, and he was still like top 20.
I still really want to believe in Yohan Moncada. I know it's been a while since his peak kind of, but he's dealt with a lot of injury. And he's gone through a couple things here and there, but I don't know. I mean, I would like to believe he could be uh a league average to above league average bat again. I mean, in 2021 he was solid. He dealt with a lot of injury throughout 2022 and 23. We haven't seen a full season out of him since 2021, which was pretty good for him. He had a 375 on base percentage. Um I'm gonna go with Yohan Moncada, on the basis that he remains healthy, which is obviously a big if, but I think we can be reminded, at least in spurts, if we see it
Right, right,
over
for
the course
sure.
of 600 plate appearances. My question is very, very similar. Um, which former top prospect has a better chance of breaking out and having something close to what scouts might have envisioned from them in the minors? Andrew Vaughn or Michael Kopech?
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, with Andrew Vaughn, like he is a first baseman um who I think was hyped up because of his hitting abilities, and he's been an above average hitter, but not necessarily anything to celebrate too much. Michael Kopech has had spurts of greatness. I think he was a how about that on mine
He
earlier
was
in
my player to watch last year.
yeah, earlier in the 2023 season, and but just overall has been not great. I would say I have more faith in Andrew Vaughn because he's shown a lot more ability to be consistently above average, whereas Kopech I think has had just blow ups, and he's been interesting in the fact that I feel like I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I could be wrong about this, but just a high velocity guy who can't seem to strike batters out for whatever reason. That could change, but it's the thing that sold people on him as a prospect before was like, you know, putting guys away, and he just hasn't shown that at the big league level consistently, I don't think. So I think Andrew Vaughn has a higher capability of breaking out of this shell, whatever shell he's in.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, that does it for the White Sox. Now on to the Cleveland Guardians, who last year, following their division title, went 76-86 and finished third in the American League Central. And in terms of subtractions, they didn't really lose or add too much. They lost on
Aniel De
Aniel
Los Santos.
De Los Santos, Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, Cal Quantrill. I added but there was no and after that. They added Scott Barlow, Austin Hedges, Alfonso Rivas, Estevan Florial. So that's a really big deal. That must have meant that they traded someone big time if they added Estevan Florial.
Welcome to the Yankees, Shane Bieber.
Yeah, yeah, big time. And they also added, I think the most fun of these additions was Carlos Carrasco. Welcome back to Cleveland. Who is your Guardians player to watch?
Something that's very interesting to me is on Fangraphs, the Guardians are projected to have a fully homegrown pitching rotation. In 2022, or at least the second half of 2022, we saw the breakout of Tristan McKenzie. Last year, we saw the breakout of Tanner Bybee, and I think Gavin Williams is the next in line in terms of potential breakouts in that Cleveland rotation. The 6'6" right-hander has a four-seam fastball that averages close to 96 miles per hour, and that's without accounting for 7.5 feet of extension, 99th percentile in baseball. In 2023, his four-seamer had a perceived velocity of 97.7 miles per hour. That was the 14th highest among the 152 pitchers with at least 500 four-seamers thrown. So he is one of the higher velocity four-seamers in terms of how it is coming out of the arm with that extension going towards home plate with, only 53 feet to go instead of 60, essentially. So he gave up 4 home runs in his first 3 career starts, and then gave up another 4 in his last 13 starts of the season. So he struggled early, and then was a lot better from July 8th to the end of the season. The only thing is that he threw his fastball 55% of the time last year. And if you throw a four-seam fastball that often, unless your name is Andre Palante, Trevor Williams, or Justin Steele, you're probably going to give up a lot of home runs because naturally fastballs are supposed to rise, hitters are going to get under it, and occasionally they're going to hit them out. However, Williams was actually pretty good at preventing this, but I would still like to see him narrow that fastball usage down to maybe like 40 to 45%, because his 2 secondary pitches, his slider and his curveball, combined for a 163 opponent's average and a 295 slugging with very similar expected stats. They also combined for an average exit velocity of 84.2 miles per hour and a 33.1% whiff rate. And against right-handed hitters, against all of his pitches, Williams recorded a opponent's average of 200, a slugging of 300, and a WOBA of 241. That 241 WOBA ranked tied for 9th lowest among the 190 right-handed pitchers that had at least 150 plate appearances and against right-handed hitters. So Gavin Williams did a lot of really interesting things last year. There obviously is some room for improvement, but I think a lot of it is just better pitch usage. Better confidence in his secondary stuff because it is very good. His changeup as well, I think, also has some potential. And if he does that, we could see another Cleveland breakout in that rotation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Cleveland filled with breakouts. None of them so far have been Daniel Espino, my 2023 Guardians player to watch. But it still could happen. I
believe he is still a top 100 guy.
Yeah. So it's arriving. As with a lot of these things, that can be a year too early on guys, or even 3 years too early. Who knows? My Guardians player to watch. This is someone who's definitely more higher profile, but I wanted to give him sort of a shout out because I think his production is not has not been celebrated as much as it should be. And no, it's not Jose Ramirez.
Oh damn.
That's
I
too
was really
it's too high profile. But it is on the opposite side of the diamond. It's Josh Naylor, who I definitely was considering highly for the top 10 first baseman list. However, I realized on Fangraphs he was a projected DH because Kyle Manzardo it was their projected first baseman. However, Naylor will get some first base time this year because I don't know how much I don't know if Manzardo is going to be on the opening day roster. And even if he is, I'm sure Naylor will get some time at first base. But over the last 2 years, Josh Naylor has hit 282 with an 807 OPS and a 127 OPS plus. Out of 143 hitters with 900 plus plate appearances over the last 2 years, his OPS plus ranks 27th, which is top 19% in the league. He's better than 4 out of 5 hitters over the last 2 years. And along with that, he has a 15% strikeout rate over these 2 years, which is 18th lowest out of 143. There are 7 hitters to have a 120 OPS plus and 5.5 plus at-bats per strikeout each of the last 2 years. They are Mookie Betts, Luis Ariz, Alex Bregman, Yandy Diaz, Kyle Tucker, Jose Ramirez, and Josh Naylor. So that is a very good list of hitters right there, and Josh Naylor is right in it with his ability to do well offensively while also not striking out, which obviously, not mutually exclusive, but it's a good list to be in. Along with that, he has a combined 9 outs above average at the first base position over the last 2 years. So doing it with the glove as well as the bat. So yeah, that's Josh Naylor, who typically I try to avoid with evaluating these players. I try to avoid like a top 5 player on the individual team, but I think I think it's safe to say he's a top 5 player on the Guardians right now, but want to give him a little bit more love. So yeah,
I think
now
you
on
could
to
probably argue against it. Like there's Ramirez, there's Bieber, there's McKenzie, Emmanuel Clase. That's only
yeah,
4.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
I think that's a fine pick in terms of profile.
yeah,
Nothing
but
wrong with that at all. I'm
either
not
way,
gonna throw a flag. Maybe even
definitely
Stephen
wanted to
Kwan.
definitely wanted to show some love. I think there's
Tanner
definitely a
Bybee.
case that he's outside the top 5 in terms of notoriety.
Oh,
So
definitely. But in
so
talent, yeah, then maybe that's different.
So I guess that does boost my case a little bit. But yeah, now on to the Cleveland questions. What do you
Yeah,
got
I
for?
mean, look, I last year I do you remember the meme question that I asked you last year?
I remember it exactly. It was
Yeah, it's not the same thing, but I had to take a similar opportunity because anytime you can meme on one particular individual, you take it. Will Miles Straw have over or under 2.5 pulled fly balls this year? He
that's
had 2 last year. Will he break the streak and have 3 this year?
yeah. So in order to do that, you have to in order to hit 3 pulled fly balls, you got to get up to the plate a good amount of times. Um,
If
and
he is, I mean, Cleveland could put him up at the leadoff spot. He could have
yeah,
700 plate appearances.
yeah. I mean, he not only pulled one, or I'm not sure it was considered a pulled fly ball because it was left center, but he not only pulled one, but he hit one out of the park last year,
He hit a home run, a
which
single one.
which is pretty nuts. So yeah, I will. Um, yeah, I'll say he gets it done. Why
Let's
not?
go.
I was optimistic about
3
Michael.
pulled fly balls.
Yeah, I was optimistic about Miles Straw last year hitting a home run, and I'll be
And it worked
optimistic
out.
about him him getting over 2.5 pulled fly balls. It's not the
Jason
speed
Adams should be forced to retire. Like that's worse than that's the same degree of giving James Shields giving up a homer to Bartolo Colon.
easily. And
Because
look
like
how
Bartolo obviously just wasn't an experienced hitter, but he was strong enough to where at least if he found his way into one,
yeah,
but Miles Straw, come on.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But it's not the speed of your progress is the fact you're making progress. And
Yeah.
Miles Straw made progress last year by hitting a home run. I believe he will continue to do that with 3 pulled fly balls this year. So my question, it's about one of the aforementioned players that you talked about is a potential top 5 player of the Guardians. So from 2021 to 2023, Shane Bieber's strikeout rate has gone from 33% to 25% to 20%. Will he keep that strikeout rate in the 20s this year?
Ooh. So Shane Bieber is in a contract year. Um, he's been, I think, noticeably a. I hate using this term and throwing out the, oh, he's not doing this, he doesn't have this cheating resource available, but he's pretty noticeably been different since the sticky substance ban. I hate being the guy that like, oh, he's not. It's like being that person that's like the Astros. They don't know what's coming without the trash cans. Hard to win without the trash cans. Um, but it's made a very noticeable difference. Does he keep it at 20%? I think he does. Yeah, I think he keeps it there. That is a like anything below 20 is like well below the major league average. And I don't know, picturing Shane Bieber being below that is just it's a hard thing to comprehend. He is going into a contract year, so I think it'll go back up marginally. Like it'll be between 20 to 22%.
Right, right. And yeah, noticeable or notably in how Shane Bieber got a 33% strikeout rate in 2021. He got taken out with an injury almost immediately after the memo came out to ban sticky substances. So we didn't really see the effect take place at all in 2021. So yeah, it's been the last 2 years where we've kind of seen it take effect.
I remember he was one of those guys though where it was like remember when everyone was tracking everyone's spin rates like
Yes.
in June of 2021? He was one of those guys where like the spin rate on his fastball was down like 150 RPM the first time out.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I do in fact remember that. Yeah, that was quite the scene. So yeah, now on to the second place Tigers, who
Yes.
would be last in the AL East. Or yeah, tied for last in the AL East. But yeah, they went and had a 78 and 84 record and finished second in the American League Central. However, they did lose Eduardo Rodriguez, Matthew Boyd, Spencer Turnbull, Tyler Alexander, Austin Meadows, and Miguel Cabrera to retirement on that last one. But they also added Kenta Maeda, Jack Flaherty, Shelby Miller, Andrew Chafin, Gio Urshela, and Keston Hura. See if that comes back to
Mark
life.
Hanna, did you mention him?
Oh damn, I forgot to mention him. Yeah, Mark Canha is he is also on the Tigers over from Milwaukee. But yeah, with the Tigers, the guy you obviously have to look at. There is one pitcher to throw 60 innings with a uh to throw 60 innings with a FIP below 2.8 each of the last 2 years, and that pitcher is obviously Jason Foley. Obviously one of the most
That is not
dominant,
where I thought you were going with that.
obviously one of the most dominant relievers in the game, Jason Foley. I mean, you see that guy coming out of the pen, you're crapping your jocks, as the Irish would say. But but no, yeah, that shocked me as well. So that made me want to
I
dig
mean,
in.
I'm sure you know where I thought you were going.
Um, what, like Alex Lang or something?
Tarek Skubal.
Oh, Tarek Skubal, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but he's fantastic in his own right, but he's no Jason Foley, obviously. No, I'm kidding about that. But Jason Foley, I saw that and I was interested, so I dug in a little bit more. So yeah, overall over the last 2 seasons, Jason Foley has a 3.2 ERA and 2.75 FIP, and only has 4 home runs allowed in these 2 seasons and a 5% walk rate. So really, really good stuff on that underlying stuff. Each of the last 2 seasons, his barrel rate and ground ball rate have both been 90th percentile or higher. His walk rate was also 95th percentile in 2022 and 89th percentile in 2023. Part of why he doesn't allow a lot of home runs is he's not allowed a lot of pulled fly balls. Only 4% of the batted balls he's allowed have been pulled fly balls over the last 2 seasons. And out of 180 pitchers with 400 plus batted balls against over the last 2 years, Jason Foley's pulled fly ball rate is the ninth lowest. And also, as you may predict, much of his success comes from his sinker, which he used 69% of the time last year, helped him get to a ground ball rate over 55%. And Jason Foley had a 20 run value from his sinker last year, which was the most of any pitch by a reliever last season. Not something I would have had in the cards, but
Oh,
Jason.
I've known that one because I know what second place is on that list as well.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty sick.
Yeah, so I've
Um,
seen that plenty of times.
so yeah, so Jason Foley, very
Ruining my Palante narratives.
yes, yes, indeed. But but yeah, Jason Foley just randomly with a 20 run value on his sinker as a guy throwing only, I think he threw 69 innings or something like that last year. But yeah, sub 2.8 FIP each of the last few years with 60 innings pitched. So shout out to Jason Foley. Who is your Tigers player to watch?
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting guys on this Tigers team this year. Um, One of them, the guy that I'm going to talk about, I've talked about previously on this show, most notably this offseason is in the positional top tens. It is Jake Rogers, who I put as my number 10 catcher, I believe it was. In 2023, he had 28.4% of his batted balls be hard hit and in the sweet spot. That ranked him third among the 286 hitters with at least 200 batted balls. He trailed only JD Martinez and Aaron Judge and was ahead of guys like Mookie Betts, Matt Chapman, Bryce Harper, and Corey Seager. And since 2021, that number is 26.4% of his batted balls that were hard hit and in the sweet spot. And that ranked him fourth among the 454 hitters with at least 250 batted balls since 2021. And on that list, he is sandwiched between Judge, JD Martinez, and Yordan Alvarez, and ahead of Kyle Schwarber, Shohei Ohtani, Bryce Harper. So those are 6 elite hitters, and right in the middle is Jake Rogers. And in 2023, he ranked 90th percentile in both blocks above average and 80th percentile in framing. He also had an 8.8%. He also had 8.8% of his batted balls be pulled hard hit fly balls in 2023. That was tied for the ninth highest among the aforementioned list of 286. The only thing really holding him back offensively is that he plays in Detroit and has issues pulling the ball on a more not consistent basis, but more like outstanding basis. So if he can do that, I would play advantage of the park he plays in. Jake Rogers can be a 115 to 120 OPS plus hitter, I would say, with elite defensive metrics.
Yeah, yeah, Jake Rogers, and just looking at him, he's someone you kind of want to root for. He seems like a, get your lunch pail and go to work type guy. Just based off that facial hair that he has.
Yes.
So yeah, now on to questions. My question actually regards your player to watch along with another person. Who ends up with the higher barrel rate, Spencer Torkelson or Jake Rogers?
Ooh. Spencer Torkelson had a pretty good barrel rate
I think it was
last
around
year.
14%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Jake Rogers was like a little below that, I think, but he did
I
have a
think
high barrel
12.
rate. Yes. Um so Spencer Torkelson last year, obviously he, was a very hyped up player. He became the first player. I learned this at the Tigers game that I went to because I was at the game where he hit his 30th home run of the season. He became the first homegrown Tigers player to hit 30 home runs in a season since Curtis Granderson in 2009, I believe it was. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so that was pretty cool to learn. Um, he took a big step forward in terms of the counting stats, and I think the rate stats are to follow. He only had a 105 OPS plus last year, so obviously they need more than that out of him for this team to be competitive in a very non-competitive American League Central. So for that reason, I do think Spencer Torkelson has the higher barrel rate because I think there is so much more room for him to grow than there is for Jake Rogers. You know, like Jake Rogers, like he just has to keep the same batted ball profile that he has and just pull the ball more. Spencer Torkelson, he can do that more, but he also has to do it more often. I think there's a lot more pressure on him to do so, and I think he has a higher ceiling of doing so, obviously. So I'm going to go with him. For my question, which is more likely? One of Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson puts up a 135 OPS plus, or Javier Baez puts up an OPS plus above 110.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, OPS or excuse me, Baez was in the 60s
Below,
last year.
he was below 600 for his OPS.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, yeah, Torkelson. I'm almost more optimistic about Green based off of the expected statistics that I saw him put up, and also he's a little faster, and that plays into a decent effect at Comerica Park. Like he'll probably get a decent amount of triples this year, if I had to predict. And yeah, so um, in terms of more likely, and in terms of what I've seen over the past couple of years, I'm gonna say it's more likely that Green or Torkelson gets to 135, and I think Green might actually get there, which might surprise some people. But in terms of rate statistics and expected rate statistics, more so, I think Green sort of has the edge there, and Baez, yeah, just in terms of overall trends, no matter what you're looking at, it just doesn't look good offensively. So it would have to be a major turnaround in order for him to be an above average hitter once again. Um, Still good, still could be a decent player. I mean, fantastic defender still. But yeah, that does it for the Detroit Tigers. And now we get on to the final team of the American League Central, the reigning defending uh reigning defending AL Central champion Minnesota Twins, who went 87-75 to win that AL Central. Over the offseason, they lost Sonny Gray, Jorge Polanco, Kenta Maeda, Joey Gallo, Donovan Solano, Michael A. Taylor, Emilio Pagan, and Tyler Mahle. And they added Carlos Santana, Anthony Desclafani, Justin Topa, and Manuel Margot, who was in our Dodgers editions as well, but
Yep,
he got
that is
he got
true.
shipped off. He got shipped off to Minnesota. Who is your Twins player to watch?
Yeah, so this team has obviously made themselves known for going power or nothing essentially over the last half decade or so. One of the guys they lost last year was Joey Gallo, as you mentioned, but they have Joey Gallo at home, and Joey Gallo at home is Matt Wallner, as I'm sure you figured I was going with there. In 133 batted balls last year, Matt Wallner put up a 374 expected WOBA, a 517 expected slugging, an average exit velocity of 91.9 miles per hour, just below 92, a barrel rate of 18.8%, and also had a below average chase rate at 26.4%, a hard hit rate of 48.1%, and a walk rate at 11%. Now, despite a higher fly ball rate and he also had a higher fly ball rate than ground ball rate and a 45.9% pull rate. So this guy is, like I said, Joey Gallo at home. Despite the high strikeout rates, he had an expected slugging at or above 490 on all fastballs, all breaking balls, and all off-speed pitches. So it wasn't like one of those situations where he mashed fastballs but couldn't hit curveball to save his life. He did strike out a lot on all of them, but when he did hit the ball, he did extremely well on all of them. In fact, his average exit velocity of 95.1 miles per hour against breaking balls and off-speed pitches was the highest among the 469 hitters with at least 25 batted balls against them, and Matt Wallner had 55, so that number isn't even really cherry picked. And he also had 100th percentile arm strength in 2023. So he was the very best at hitting the ball hard against curveballs, or excuse me, all breaking balls and all off speed pitches. And he was the best at arm strength in terms of his outfield throwing power in 2023. So Matt Wallner, I'm very excited to see if he can translate that over a full season because it would be a lot of fun to watch.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, we say, yeah, Joey Gallo at home, but I mean, like, overall,
Where's
just
show me the difference?
objectively, like, better results than
Yeah.
Joey
I
Gallo.
mean, it took him a 328 BABIP to have like a 247 batting average, but that plays
Yeah, that does play. That does in fact play. And an expected WOBA, I believe, in the 370s, which is
274.
pretty exceptional. Um, yeah, my player to watch. I don't have too much on him, but I'm very intrigued by what he did in a short time, um, coming back last year. And talking about the Twins, I mentioned some of those subtractions with Sonny Gray, most notably in that rotation, but also Kenta Maeda and Tyler Mahle, who had some starts last year. So, their rotation is not as strong coming back this year. However, they do have a guy who is in their projected rotation who I think, based off of a short amount of workload that he had last year, I think could make a decent contribution to that Twins rotation. And I'm talking about Chris Paddock, who they acquired early in 2022, or like literally right before the season in 2022 for in part of that Tyler or Taylor
Taylor
Rogers
Rogers.
trade, if I'm not mistaken. So he actually got Tommy John surgery in 2022. He came back from Tommy John surgery late last year. And he started out in the minors, where in the minors he threw 9 2/3 innings and had a 38% strikeout rate. And then at the major league level, combined in the regular season and postseason, he had a 41% strikeout rate and 3% walk rate in 8 2/3 innings pitched. He also had exceptional whiff rate numbers along with that. But in his lone regular season start, he had a career high four-seam fastball velocity by 0.7 miles per hour. So I think he's coming back just generally stronger and more effective, which led him to having, a 41% strikeout rate at the big league level. Obviously, that's not going to translate over a long sample, but regardless, I think he should have a higher strikeout rate than he normally did prior to his time with the Twins. So yeah, on to questions.
Yeah, so my Minnesota Twins question: buy or sell that half of Johan Duran's total pitches, will clock at 100 miles per hour. It was 46.5% last year.
Yeah, that is something. That is something. Um, I'll say sell, because I feel like even if guys or even if players, even if pitchers are getting better in their career, typically they're forcing or they're not forcing fastball velocity, but general velocity tends to drop even at their younger years. So I'll say sell, but I could easily be dipped
Yeah.
on that because I think
I think it depends on how much he throws his curveball, because he threw it like 25 or like 22% of the time or something like that last year.
yeah, that could play into effect. But I think like Emmanuel Clase's velocity is already dropping, and
Hmm.
he's only 26 or 27, but still, I mean, still like really, really fast, but just not having that same effectiveness in terms of the miles per hour. My question, it's once again regarding one of your players. Better follow up to their rookie season, Matt Wallner or Edward Julian?
Ooh, yeah, two very similar batted ball profiles. I mean, Matt Wallner, I think, has a very, I don't want to say one-sided, style of baseball, because he did hit for like a decent-ish average last year with a 328 BABIP, and obviously he has a good throwing arm. Edward Julian, I think, has a higher ceiling in terms of contact, certainly a lower ceiling in terms of power. Um, but he had excellent on base numbers last year. And I feel like he is more prone to dropping his strikeout rate. I think both of them had strikeout rates above 30% last year. So I'll go with Edward Julian. Yeah,
Yeah,
I am going against my player to watch there, but yeah, I mean, what was Edward Julian's OBP last year? Like, despite very high strikeout rates, it was very high.
might have been 380 something, like
Yeah,
381. Um, I'm for some
Edward.
reason that's sticking in my mind.
Yeah, no, he got on base he had a 381 OBP last year and a 98th percentile walk rate, and also a 100th percentile chase rate, 14.3%. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it's very good stuff from old Eddie J. And now, moving on from divisional breakdowns, we will get into the advancement of the Kern and Gianta 50 with players 30 through 21 on the list. If you want to check out the previous 20 players that we've already listed off, check out episodes 296 and 295 toward the end of the episodes where we revealed them. But yeah, now on to 30 through 21. Let's start out with your number 30.
Yeah, so in my 30, if you recall, my 31 was Michael Harris II, and in my 30, I'm staying at the same position and putting Luis Robert Jr., which kind of shows how close my decision making was with Luis Robert and with Michael Harris II, because I'm putting them one spot apart from each other in this ranking. Look, we've obviously seen the power breakout for Luis Robert Jr. We saw it for the first time in a full season last year. 38 home runs and 20 stolen bases and 595 plate appearances and 857 OPS. And it still felt like there could be a bit room for more even. Obviously the strikeouts are not good. The walks have not been good. He had a very Salvador Perez 2021-esque season, but it's coming from a 25-year-old center fielder with excellent defense, so it's okay. Um, as opposed to the opposite. Luis Robert Jr. had 13 outs above average last year in center field at a premier defensive position. Uh, may not have been the smartest base runner, but he, is very fast. Um, and his arm strength, his arm value are both very good. And yeah, this is a guy that can hit the ball, weirdly at an average exit velocity, but even then, is still crushing the ball when he gets it. I still feel like there is a lot of room for improvement with him, obviously with the walks, but even with, the more consistent hard contact, he had an exit velocity below 90 last year. I think he can very easily get that up above 90, and we can start seeing that power on an even more consistent basis while keeping that defense, maybe even seeing a jump in base running value. Um, and for that reason, for that potential and what we could see, I kept Luis Robert in my top 30.
Right, right. Yeah, it's crazy that he had the greatest season for a center fielder in baseball history last year, like Salvador Perez in
Yeah,
2021 as
exactly.
a catcher. Yeah. It's crazy that Luis Robert is basically, Willie Mays at the plate and Andrew Jones with the
Andrew
glove.
Jones in center.
Yep. Yeah. It's crazy that happened. Yeah. But the reason why I got a little bit giddy there is that is our first actual overlap
Yes.
of the
Yes.
top 50 list, which is hard
Let's
to do
go.
because there's so many options. It's not limited to position where we had much more overlap. But yeah, it's for both of us, he is number 30, Luis Robert.
Wow.
So yeah, what I have to say about Luis Robert, he was 23rd among all players in F4 last year, and he was the only player in baseball last year with an 850 plus OPS, 850 plus OPS, 10 plus stolen bases, and 1 plus D WAR. And in my opinion, if he's able to repeat what he did last year, I think I'll view him as a top 20 player in baseball. I think it's just the fact that we've only really seen him do this over one full season. So and yeah, he definitely has the potential to repeat success. He's I think what 27 right now, or yeah, 26.
26.
Yeah, I mean so much potential there. So yeah, excited to see what he's able to do in 2024. But I have him at 30.
Good stuff.
Who's your number 29?
Yeah, my number 29, I'm going back on the mound, and I'm taking a guy that I had to change positionally. I'm taking Corbin Burns in my 29. You might recall me having him as my number 7 pitcher, but I moved him up to number 5 on this list because of the trade to the Baltimore Orioles. I think there is a lot more inherent value that he is going to bring pitching in that ballpark versus in Milwaukee. So I know I hate to just change up my list like that, but uh, there is something to be said about the fact that he's going to be pitching in a new ballpark. I think that he's going to have this revenge type of contract year if he doesn't get this extension. Being out of the organization that told him that he was the reason they missed the playoffs on a team that had like a 90 something weighted runs created plus throughout the entire season, in a season where he had a sub 3 ERA. Last year was probably his like worst year since 2021 by most measures, but I think we have a very good chance of seeing him going back to his 2021 through 22 self. We certainly saw it in the second half of last year. And when I talk about Corbin Burns and being better in Baltimore, according to Statcast, he gave up a projected how many home runs? 25 home runs in Milwaukee and 18 in Baltimore. So those 7 less home runs, it's going to provide a lot more value for his FIP, which is what made him such a well-remarked pitcher in his Cy Young season in 2021. All of his stuff is still really good. His cutter still gets very good results. His secondaries still get very good results. And I think it was worth changing my rankings for him because of the trade.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime you have a guy, anytime you have a pitcher going to Baltimore, that's gonna boost your opinion of him, naturally speaking. So, yeah, I mean, he probably moved up in my personal pitcher rankings as well, considering where he's going to be pitching at. So yeah, now on to my number 29. Your number 29 was the 2021 NL Cy Young. My number 29 is the 2021 NL MVP, Bryce Harper, who I think some people might say I am undervaluing him a little bit, but he's been very, very good the past 2 years, but not necessarily at MVP level. However, if you include that MVP season, since 2021, he is top 5 in baseball in on-base percentage, slugging, and OPS. Over a top 5 hitter over the last 3 years. Also 97th percentile or higher in expected WOBA each of the last 4 years. So yeah, I'm excited about I obviously really enjoy Bryce Harper, although I think if he were at that 2021 level more recently, I'd probably have him a little bit higher. But yeah, I mean, still a 146 OPS plus over the last 2 seasons. I would put him like and at first base, you're kind of limited in how highly you can be ranked because you're naturally not going to have as much defensive value. However, still, he had 3 outs above average in a brief time at first base last year. So yeah, I'm excited to see Bryce Harper in potentially 140, 150 games this year, as opposed to the limited time he's had the past couple years. So yeah, hopefully by the time next season comes around, he's higher on this list. But who do you have as your number 28?
Yeah, so when I was deciding what to do with Corbin Burns and where I wanted to draw the line with him, I decided to draw that line at Kevin Gausman, which is who I put in my 28. Um, I know that you had him pretty lower on your list. Where did you have him again?
I think 30, 39.
39. So we're 11 spots off on him, which I guess is pretty large for this point in the list. But regardless of that, when we're talking about, a strikeout rate around 30% and a walk rate around 5% ish over the last 2 seasons, I know that the batted balls could be a lot better, but that's accounting for the few times when there's actually a batted ball to talk about, because Kevin Gausman, in terms of the things he can control, is one of the best in baseball. I think he was like close to being the American League leader in FIP last year. If he actually wasn't, I believe he might have been. But I mean, he, 93rd percentile strikeout rate, 68th percentile walk rate. Very good, self-control sort of numbers. And yeah, I mean, obviously the expected stats are nicer to him because guys do happen to hit the ball pretty hard against him. They do barrel it up around 10% of the time in terms of batted balls in total. And he did have a high line drive rate in 2022 that decreased a little bit, but still pretty not great in 2023. Yeah, but because of the strikeouts and walks, like I think it's hard to deny the talent of Kevin Gausman, and also the fact that there could be a lot more out there for him if he learns to better control those batted balls against him.
Right, right. Yeah. He's definitely one of the, or if I'm betting on someone to lead the league in FIP, I might put Kevin Gausman. Like, he has been great with those numbers. It's just been an anomaly with how different his expected ERA and FIP numbers have been. And I tend to value the expected ERA numbers a little bit more, especially when you're considering, I don't think he's someone who gives up like a lot of like straightaway fly balls, which would be the explainer of
Mm-hmm.
that, but that's digging too deep. At least for this episode. My number 28, this would probably be a shocker of a pick in some circles, but I don't think this would necessarily surprise you too much. But in 28, I have Garrett Cole. And that is because I would be pretty surprised if he repeats the level of success that he had last year. Out of 100 pitchers with 2,000 plus pitches thrown last year, he had the third luckiest difference in slugging and expected slugging, and second luckiest difference in WOBA and expected WOBA. So I'd be surprised to see him have a sub-3 ERA again, especially considering his strikeout rate went down, his average fastball velocity went down. Regardless, still, I mean, I still have him in the top 30 for a reason. He's still a very, very good pitcher who I expect to be the ace of the Yankees staff and one of the best pitchers in baseball. I just don't expect him to be repeating as a Cy Young. Although he's probably an AL Cy Young favorite, it's probably because of lack of competition in the American League, in my opinion. But MLB Network had him at 9. I don't think he's top 10 right now, but I think I probably have him lower than the average fan would have him at. But yeah, Garrett Cole is my 28. Who's your 27?
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I don't have him at 9.
Yeah.
I do have him, higher than you do, but not that high. My number 27, a guy that I think you might be a little higher on than me, but it is Dansby Swanson, and I think MLB Network probably would have had him a lot lower. Where did MLB Network have Dansby Swanson?
You mentioned that they had him at 67.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I knew they put him in some outlandish, like crazy, not good spot.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you said 67, which is crazy considering he is literally the best fielder in baseball while being a pretty good hitter and base runner.
Yeah, and not even pretty good base runner. He's been like consistently a great base runner for a while. Yeah, they put him at 67. Yeah, I put him at 27. For that. Yeah, I mean, he's been one of the most consistent base runners in all of baseball. If you look at his BSR over the last like 5 years, like it's such a hard thing to repeat, but he's done it, and he's like one of the only safe bets to put up a rock solid BSR every year in this league. Not to mention, he's one of the best defenders. He led the entire major leagues in outs above average last year in his first year in a Cubs uniform. Obviously the batted balls weren't quite the best, but regardless, all he needs to be is an above average hitter. And he was exactly that last year, on the fringes of that at 744 for his OPS. But regardless of that, his expected slugging was a lot higher than his actual slugging. His expected batting average was pretty comfortably higher than his actual batting average. Really might have taken some stuff away if I had to guess. But regardless, Dansby Swanson is ridiculously good at defense and base running. I think there's room for more for him on offense. And if he does all that, 27 might not even be that good of a look, but that's where I have him right now.
Right, right. Yeah, for my 27, this is like you might notice that I'm pretty low on just the general pitcher landscape in 2020 in 2024. I just don't see a lot of like real like crazy ace performances coming out this year, because that just happened last year. Like there weren't guys didn't really show up and have like historical pitching seasons necessarily. My number 27 is Spencer Strider, who was my number 3 starting pitcher in baseball. Yeah, number 3. And yeah, he's easily the best strikeout walk rate guy in the game this year. Like in terms of guys who are going to lead strikeout minus walk rate, I'd be surprised if that's not Spencer Strider this year, because I'm pretty sure he did that last season. Yeah, I don't, he had a 3.86 ERA last year, which isn't necessarily ace level, but I expect that to lower based on the expected numbers and the FIP that he consistently puts out. Like it's been sub 3 each of the last 2 years, and it was sub 2. That FIP was sub 2 in 2022. So yeah, I expect Spencer Strider to maybe have a low 3s ERA, which is that's a guy I would put as number 27 on this list. And hopefully he continues that innings production that he had last year. I mean, over 180 innings is very good to have, especially when you're having such long innings like he has. When you're striking out that many guys, you're throwing a lot of pitches, but still managed to get 185 last year, I'm pretty sure. Who is your number 26?
Yeah, just missing the top 25, but still being an excellent enough player to go this high on the list is where I put Marcus Semien, who unbelievably looks like that contract might be a steal for the Texas Rangers right now. Struggled a bit in his first year in the new uniform, but did so much better last year. His sweet spot rate went up by 5%. His strikeout rate went down by 2%. His walk rate went up by over 2%. And more importantly, His fly ball rate went up a tad. His ground ball rate actually also went up a tad, but wasn't that high. And his pull rate went up to 46.9%. And he's one of those guys I talk about where, if you just pull it enough, hit it in the air enough, and are like a little bit strong enough, you'll find your way into a lot. And for him, that was 29 home runs last year and 753 plate appearances, and that is not the highest home run rate. But when you count that with both his incredible defense that he did last year, a major step up for him at second base defensively, 15 as above average, and his base running, which has remained excellent into his 30s at second base. I think Marcus Semien is an easy top 26 player in the league, top 30 at the very least. He's walking a lot more, like I mentioned, striking out a lot less, chasing a lot less. His chase rate was down to 21.4%, a 3% decrease from last year. So he made a lot of major improvements last year. And if he just keeps doing that, which feels like he could do it on a very consistent basis, I put him at 26.
Yep. My number 26 comes from Baltimore. He is a young, exciting player in the league. Talking about Gunnar Henderson, who I had as my number 3 third baseman, which might surprise some folks. Not you, because you also had him as a number 3 third baseman, and you haven't mentioned him on the lists so far yet, right?
I have not.
Yeah, so he's likely higher on the list than 26 for you. But for me, he's 26 because he showed some great flashes, or if you call 97 games a flash. He had a great final 97 games last year, in which he was 17th among all players in F4, and he was one of 4 players with at least a 130 weighted runs created plus, 2 defensive runs above average, and 3 base running runs in that span, in which the other 3 were Francisco Lindor, Bobby Witt Jr., and Julio Rodriguez. Regarding Gunnar Henderson, I think of these 50, he's one of the most complete players on this list. There's no weak part of this game, like we talk about. A lot of first basemen, it's like, oh, great hitter, but defense and base running kind of lacks, or like some players, their hitting might lack, and they might have great defense and base running. With Gunnar Henderson, and I'm not really concerned about any part of his game, and that's very impressive for a guy that's I think only heading into his age 23 season. So yeah, pretty optimistic about him. Who's your number 25?
Yeah, I do have Gunnar Henderson a bit higher on my list. My number 25 is Gunnar Henderson. We have him one spot apart. Yeah, I mean, we're finally clicking on all cylinders here. We have the same number 30. Gunnar Henderson's one spot apart for us. We're finally, getting in the flow of things here. But yeah, I mean, you pretty much said everything that I was about to say about him. The strikeouts could be a little better, but he also is literally going into his age 23 season, so there's no reason to believe it can't be. The fact that he's already at a 9% walk rate, and I think there's a reason for that to go up, that's certainly an exciting thing. There's still so much room for growth in him, and his ceiling is very high. Excellent base runner, pretty good fielder at third base as well. We both had him at number 3 at third base, and I don't have much more to add because you took a lot of the words out of my mouth. So I have Gunnar Henderson at 25.
Yeah. My number 25, I believe you put him at number 31. It's a center fielder on the list. My number 3 center fielder in baseball, Michael Harris the second. I think why I'm very optimistic about him, and more optimistic than I think a lot of fans would have him, is you just look on the surface and you look at his 2023 compared to his 2022, and you're like, oh, this guy, he wasn't as good. He kind of faded off. Maybe his rookie year was a bit fluky. However, looking at Michael Harris's 2023 season, he was very, very uncharacteristic the first 6 or 7 weeks of that year, and then he just flipped the switch and became better than he was in his rookie season. In his final 100 games, Michael Harris had a 912 OPS with great defense and base running, and put him top 10 among all players in F4 in those final 100 games. So I think he is still at that elite status that he established himself at. in the 2022 season, where he was an extremely complete player. Like I talked about how complete Gunnar Henderson was, but Michael Harris, the second, I would say, is even more complete. He's an excellent hitter, defender, and base runner. Great on all fronts, and I expect him to remind everyone why he was Rookie of the Year in 2022. Who is your number 24?
At number 24, staying in Baltimore, going with the other young, exciting bat, or well, one of the many, but the other one that's gotten, the main recognition. It is Adley Rutschman. He had his first full season last year, and in some ways looked a lot similar, in some ways looked a lot different, but regardless, was still one of the most valuable players on that Orioles team that obviously won 100 games. He has such a tremendous skill set in that he even without a lot of the exit velocity numbers, he is still able to generate a lot of power. 20 home runs last year. He doesn't strike out like at all. He doesn't chase. He doesn't whiff. He walks a lot. He had a 374 OBP last year, which was awesome. A 37% sweet spot rate. While also being a solid defensive catcher, he took a bit of a step back defensively on Fangraphs, but regardless, was still very good on all fronts, at least 65th percentile in blocks, caught stealings, framing, and pop time. So all of the things he did, were solid in 2023. It'd be very cool if he could if he could hit the ball a little bit harder, but definitely not a requirement because he has shown that he can perform very well without it. So I have Adley Rutschman in 24.
Yeah, my number 24. It's a interesting pick for me to put him at, because I feel like in terms of if I were to rank these guys based off of ceiling, I think I would put him top 10. I think I was just a little bit weirded out by some of the offensive trends that went down in 2023, but I'm talking about Fernando Tatis Jr., who had as my number 4 right fielder. I think he is definitely due to improve at the plate. Maybe obviously he's shown the potential to be a 160 OPS plus guy. I think that could be, 125, 130 this year, while being, if he is able to repeat defensive success, be like the best defensive right fielder in baseball. So that is tremendous, tremendous value to have. And if he does that, then he's definitely going to rise up the list for next year. Also, yeah, very good base runner, 29. Yeah, I think 29 stolen bases last year. So yeah, I mean, tremendous, tremendous ceiling. I think just the fact that he had a random 111 OPS plus season last year brings him down, brings him down further than I would have thought I would have had him, talking about him, at this point, last season. So yeah, who's your number 23?
My number 23 is a guy that plays the same position as the guy I just mentioned, Adley Rutschman. It is Sean Murphy. I have 2 catchers on this list, and I put them back to back, which again shows how close my decision was between the 2 of them. Sean Murphy only had 438 plate appearances last year, which is actually a little closer to on par for a catcher than what Adley Rutschman have, because the Braves had a lot of room to leave him out of the lineup on certain days because of how deep they were. Orioles put him at DH when they didn't put him at catcher. But in those 438 plate appearances, Sean Murphy was one of the best defensive catchers in the league and one of the best offensive. He was actually like Mike Piazza at the plate and Yadier Molina in the field, unlike a certain other catcher that got that same comp. He had a 537 expected slugging, and oh, by the way, 478 actual slugging. So because he hit the ball to center field a lot, which I'm pretty sure he did. Actually, he didn't. He had a 48% pull rate. He just wasn't, the expected statistics just didn't quite align with what he actually did. He had a 16% barrel rate, which was excellent, a 23% chase rate, which was excellent, and a 38.1% sweet spot rate, which was excellent. All of his stuff was bright red except for his whiffs and his strikeouts, which is forgivable from me, especially because he is a dominant fielder. He was the best blocking catcher in baseball last year, according to StatCast. Also, elite in framing, elite in pop time, and elite in caught stealing above average. There really isn't a single part of Sean Murphy's game where he didn't excel last year, except for maybe base running, but he's a catcher, so it's a lot more forgivable. He's going into his second season in Atlanta, and there is kind of always a thing where people take a step up in their second year, leaving a small market for a big market. And I feel like we could see a lot more out of Sean Murphy than we already did, especially in a larger sample. So for that reason, I obviously put him as my number one catcher, and I put him at number 23 overall.
Yeah, yeah. My number 23, I did the same thing as you did and had back-to-back positional guys or back-to-back guys at the same position at 23 and 24, which yeah, does demonstrate how close the decision was for right field because my number 23 is Kyle Tucker of the Houston Astros. I think there's so much value in the reliability with him. Like he has turned out like basically the same season each of the last 3 years, at least in terms of F4. I think it's been like 4.6, then 4.7, then 4.8. It's been pretty ridiculous. He's had at least a 125 OPS plus and 4.5 F4 each of the last 3 years. Over the last 3 years in combined, he has a 139 OPS plus, and only he and Julio Rodriguez had a 25-25 season in both 2022 and 2023. So does it on the bases as well, with a 25-25 season each of the last 2 years. I think a lot of his value does come in the fact that he is just able to consistently do it year after year, and he's done it pretty much ever since he's had like consistent playing time at the MLB level. Because 2020 wasn't a full year, obviously, and 2019, I don't think he had much time in the MLB level. So, since 2021, it's been just the same Kyle Tucker, just doing it year after year after year, which, is very, very valuable. Who's your number 22?
Yeah,
22.
my number 22, you put him at 29. You mentioned him earlier, and it's Bryce Harper. I decided to keep him as high on the list as I felt was reasonable, with him making that positional change over to first base where there's a lot less inherent value according to stats like WAR. It felt like Bryce Harper had a down year last year, coming back from Tommy John surgery after 7 months and, only being able to DH for a certain amount of time. I can't imagine he was doing the regular, playing baseball was normal for him last year, and he still threw up a 900 OPS. So I feel like there's still a 950 season in there in store for 2020, 2024. I mean, if you look at this expected statistics, his expected slugging was 31 points higher than his actual slugging. He's still hitting the ball very hard. He's still walking at an elite rate. His chasing was a lot worse last year. I'd like to maybe give him a pass on that and say, hey, maybe that's something that he could fix with more time and also maybe not recovering from his surgery. His chase was 24.8% in 2021, 33.1%, 33.4% last year. So it's certainly a problem that can be fixed. But regardless, it feels like last year was a down year, even in a year where we had a 900 OPS in 546 plate appearances. A lot of that coming just during the recovery period for Tommy John. So I still think there's a lot in store for him, and I think there's very good reason to keep him in the top 25. And for me, that was 22.
Yeah, Harper year after year has great underlying numbers, no matter the results, even which the results are still great, but yeah, 97th percentile or higher in expected WOBA each of the last 4 years. He just continues to hit the ball hard, hit the ball in the air, and just do well at the plate. Speaking of that, my number 22, not necessarily at a consistent level, but last year did it at a great, did it in a fantastic manner. My number 22 is Matt Olson, of the Atlanta Braves. He had an amazing offensive season last year, consisted of a 993 OPS, obviously 54 home runs, which is pretty crazy. Part of that had to do with him increasing his fly ball rate by 6 percentage points. And if he does that once again, has an OPS near 1,000. I think it's almost a guarantee that I would put him top 15 next year. But yeah, I mean, he has only really had one season ever like this, so I need to wait for him to do it once again. But yeah, I mean, just what he showed last year was absolutely tremendous, and it wasn't no really luck involved either. So I'm sure he has the ability to continue to do that. Who's your number 21?
Yeah, rounding out this episode for me, you just touched on him, so we're pretty closely on the same page with Kyle Tucker. I put him at number 21, you had him at 23, 2 spots apart. So pretty good job there. Yeah, I mean, he's been super consistent. He's had, I think, 5 win seasons in each of the last 3 years. I probably easily would have put him top 20 on this list with that consistency. The only thing for me was that he showed a pretty major step back on defense last year. He went from having 5 outs above average in the 89th percentile to an outs above average of -6 in the 9th percentile. His arm value also went down from his arm value also went down from the 97th percentile in 2022 to the 42nd percentile in 2023. Yeah, so I don't really know what that step back in defense was all about. I'm hoping it could just be like a 1 year fluke type of thing because offensively he has done pretty much the same thing for, going on 3 years now. He's been one of the most consistent players in all of baseball. There's not a single thing that he doesn't thrive in on offense. And yeah, I mean, he is a borderline top 20 player for me. We both have him just on the fringes of it, but still a very excellent player.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, we swapped 21 and 23 because my number
Hmm.
21 is Sean Murphy. He's also my fourth Brave of this episode. I had
And I'm assuming there's more to come next episode as well.
oh, absolutely, yeah. This is yeah, I had Spencer Strider, Michael Harris II, Matt Olson, and now Sean Murphy to round out my 30 through 21. Um, gotta love Sean Murphy. He was my number 2 catcher. He was your number 1. He's the only player in baseball over the last 2 years with 30 defensive runs above average and a 120 weighted runs created plus. Just no one has had that level of defensive value and hitting abilities. He has fantastic offensive underlying numbers. Um, at least last year, 96th percentile expected WOBA, 95th percentile expected slugging, and 96th percentile barrel rate. Part of his problem and why he maybe didn't perform to those expected metrics was he hit a disproportionate amount of straightaway fly balls, I believe. But still, like the fact that he can barrel it up 16% of the time and have those high expected numbers signifies that he is, tremendous potential at the plate, along with being a legit Gold Glove defender. So yeah, I mean you gotta love Sean Murphy, which is why he's in the top 25 for the each of us. And yeah, so that does it for the 30 through 21 here, and that does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. Anything more to add before or yeah, we actually should
I was literally gonna say we should go over our list again.
yeah.
I'll start at 30. I put Luis Robert Jr., 29, Corbin Burns, 28, Kevin Gosman, 27, Dansby Swanson, 26, Marcus Semien, 25, Gunnar Henderson, 24, Adley Rutschman, 23, Sean Murphy, 22, Bryce Harper, and number 21, Kyle Tucker.
Yeah, at my number 30, I also had Luis Robert. At number 29, I had Bryce Harper. 28, Garrett Cole. 27, Spencer Strider. 26, Gunnar Henderson. 25, Michael Harris II. 24, Fernando Tatis Jr. 23, Kyle Tucker. 22, Matt Olson. 21, Sean Murphy. So yeah, excited to delve into the top 20, 20 through 11 next episode, along with the American League West, which yeah, we're heating up on divisions, getting closer to that MLB season. Very, very fun. Yeah, anything more before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's all I had for this episode.
Yeah, good stuff. Me as well. So yeah, if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. Also, check out all the features of that YouTube channel, including the playlists, which feature the guest interviews. Most recently, we had Stephen Schock of D1Baseball.com to talk about the college baseball season. So I'm sure there's a decent amount of people kind of gearing up for the MLB season by watching college baseball and getting invested in it. So check out that interview because he has a plethora of information on or a plethora of perspective in general on the college baseball world. along with that, check out our social media. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next week, where we will be talking the American League West and revealing players 20 through 11 on our top 50 lists. We will see you then.
This conversation is over.